Okay, today we're going to simplify square roots of variable expressions. If you remember last time, we did simplify square roots of numerical expressions, meaning square roots of some expression with numbers. Today we're going to have some variables in them. That's the only difference, okay? So for example, if you guys remember when we simplified square root of 4, what was square root of 4? 2, very good. What was square root of 100? 10. Those are easy, right? What if I give you a square root of like 8? That will be that's not going to be a perfect square, right? So do you guys remember what square root of 8 was? 2 red 2. You guys remember that? Because square root of 8 is square root of 4 times square root of 2. You guys remember? Right? So that was an irrational number. You guys remember this? So today now, we're not going to just have numbers. We're going to have some variables in there. Okay? So the key point is this. Whenever you simplify these square roots, let me ask you this question. If I have square root of, when we simplify square root of some variable expression, okay, is it possible for it to come out to be negative when you simplify? By the way, what is this expression that we're trying to simplify? Is this positive number or negative number? Positive. There's nothing in front, right? That's positive. So when you simplify a positive number, what do you get? What do you end up getting? Positive number, right? So could it ever be negative? Can a positive number be negative when you simplify? No, that's impossible, right? So the answer is no. So that's the key idea. So if you understand this idea, when you simplify a positive number, it'll always be what? Positive. And so if you understand this idea, it'll make sense. By the way, can we have square root of some negative number?
Yeah. No, just kidding.
Is this possible? No. This is what? It's not a what?
Not a real number.
Real number. Right? Can you say no solution? No. Why not? Why can we not say no solution? So you cannot have square root of a negative number. Yeah, why not? Well, not only that, when you say no solution, you're assuming that you have a what? Equation or expression? Equation. Is this an equation? No, this is an expression, right? Expression doesn't have any solution. You only simplify expressions. Does that make sense? So please keep this in mind. Like if you simplify a positive number, it's going to be positive, and also you cannot have a square root of a negative number. Okay, so that's the key point. If you understand this, it'll be easy for you to understand the rest of it. Okay, here we go. Let me give you a fact. Okay, before we start. So if you square root x squared, now notice I'm giving you a square root of a expression with variable in it, variable expression. By the way, what is this number? What is this whole expression? Is this whole expression positive or negative? It's positive, right? There's nothing in front, right? It's positive. So when you simplify a positive number, it has to be positive. So this is a fact. If you square root an x squared, the answer is, anybody have any guess? Yes.
X.
If you write x, not quite. It's actually absolute value of x. So we're going to think about why it becomes absolute value of x, right? In a minute. So hold on. But think about this. We just said that if you simplify a positive number, it has to be positive, right? So there's, if you kind of think about that, there's a reason why we put the absolute value. Can somebody think of why?
Oh.
Okay. So think about this. Let me actually. I want you to think as a group. How come we need the absolute value this time, guys? Think about it as a group. Think about it. Ask your team. All right. So. Okay, so a lot of you people may think if we have the square root of x squared, you think it's just x. But this is not true. This is false, okay? Can somebody think of a case or a counterexample that shows you why this is false? I even give you a hint. Think about it. When x is positive, that's fine. Like square root of 4 2 squared, that's 2, right? But when x is negative, it doesn't work out. Can somebody give me an example? Okay. Bella? Right, so what would be a counterexample? What's an example that shows that this is false? Okay. Camila? Okay, so if I have square root of negative 3 squared, right? Yeah, what's this? What's square root of negative 3 squared?
3.
It's 3. But if you were to actually follow this, what's x right now in this case? is negative 3. So can I say this square root of negative 3 is negative 3? Is this true? No, you see, if I were to follow this, right, this will be wrong. We know that square root of negative 3 squared, isn't that square root of 9? It's really 3, not negative 3, right? You see how this is wrong? So if you were to actually follow this, square root of x squared equals x, you get the wrong answer. So when x is negative, this will be false. When x is positive, of course, it's true, right? But when x is negative, right, the statement is not true. That's why we have to be careful, right, to put the absolute value. Because what is this number? This whole expression, isn't that whole expression positive? Right? Because it's really basically square root of 9, right? When you simplify a positive number, what does it become? Positive number, right? It doesn't come out to negative, does it? Does that make sense? Do you see why we need the absolute value? Okay. So please keep this in mind. This is first fact. Okay. There's another one that we're gonna go. So when you square root an x squared, it comes out to the absolute value of x. Because when you simplify a positive number, what does it become? Positive. You gotta make sure it's positive, right? If you leave out the absolute value, if it happens to be negative, then you're saying the positive number when you simplify it becomes negative. All right. Are we okay with that? So let's look at our second fact. Okay. Okay. So if square root of x squared is absolute value of x, what do you think square root of x cubed would be? This is a little bit different. So if square root of x squared is absolute value of x, square root of x cubed is, you may think that it's well, if this will be, what would you think this will simplify to? Yes, Christina?
It's not the absolute value of x, which is x. If it's a positive number.
Okay, first of all, let's write this down. Hold on. Would you agree that square root of x cubed isn't that same as square root of, can I write this as square root of x squared times square root of x?
Yeah.
Is that okay? You guys remember the rule? If I have square root of ab, right? This is the same as what? Square root of a times square root of b. So since I have x to the third, could I write this as square root of x squared times square root of x?
Yeah.
Why do you think I did it this way? Because what's square root of x squared? That is absolute value of x. We just said that, right? Square root of x. So how many people think this is the answer? Okay. None of you? What do you think this simplifies to then? Dana? No, that's when you actually are solving. If you have like x squared equals some number, that's when you put plus or minus. Okay, so no, that's not correct. Be careful. We're just simplifying. This number is positive, right? So when you simplify a positive number, it comes out to be positive. It doesn't become positive or negative, right? You're just simplifying, right? When you're solving, that's when we get positive or negative. Please be careful. Actually, so we just said square root of x squared is the absolute value of x, right? But in this case, you could just write it this way: x square root of x. Okay, this is a fact. If you simplify square root of x cubed, you just write x square root of x. How come we don't need the absolute value in this case? Didn't we just say square root of x squared is x, absolute value of x? Why do we not need the absolute value here? Okay, I want you to think as a team. What do you think? How come we don't need the absolute value? Don't we need the absolute value here? We just said, right? We just said this right here. Didn't we just say square root of x squared is absolute value of x, right? How come we don't need the absolute value here, guys? Think about it. Why not? Who thinks they know why we don't need the absolute value in this case? Because didn't we just say, look, square root of x squared, didn't we say it's absolute value of x up here? Right? That was one of our facts, right? We just talked about it. We want to make sure, right? When you simplify a positive number, right, it becomes positive. Positive expression, it becomes positive expression. How come we don't need the absolute value in this case? Okay, Tajwar, what do you think this is?
Because if it was negative, then it would make it negative and
Okay, kind of. Okay, so actually it turns out, look at the x inside the square root. Can you have a square root of a negative number?
no.
No, so when you write it this way, you know x can't be negative to start with. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So when you have square root of x, you know x can't be negative anyway, right? So you don't need the absolute value. Does that make sense? That's the reason why. Whereas before here, right, you don't have any x now in the square root anywhere, right? So you gotta make sure that x, you have to say that x has to be positive, right? So that's why you need the absolute value. Here, in this case, because x is in the square root, right, you know that x can't be negative anyway to start with. Here's an example. Think about this. What is square root of negative 2 cubed? Isn't that square root of negative 8? Right? It's not square root of negative 2 cubed? Negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 3? What's negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2? Negative 8. Can you have such number? Do you have such number on a number line? Do you have square root of negative 8? Can you have square root of a negative number? In other words, which two same numbers can you multiply and make it negative? Is it possible? No. Therefore, this is not a real number, right? So therefore, you cannot have negative 2 square root of negative 2, can you? This is not on a number line, right? It's not a real number. So therefore, when you have an expression like this where x is inside a square root, you know that x has to be positive anyway. So you don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about saying x, right? You don't have to worry about saying x is absolute value of x because x is positive to start with in this case. Does this make sense? So x must be positive in this case here. So you don't need the absolute value. Does that make sense, guys? Okay. So when you have square root of x to the odd power, turns out you don't need to put the absolute value. But when you have square root of even power, you do need to put the absolute value. Okay? Whereas like square root of x squared, right? That was an even power, right? You see how this is even power? You do need the absolute value. Okay? But there are times where you won't need the absolute value even if it's even. We'll get there in a minute, but for now, this is good, okay? Are you okay with this? So square root of x squared is absolute value of x. Square root of x cubed is what? X square root of x. Okay? You don't need to put the absolute value. Because x has to be positive for it to be even, right? Be on a number line. Right? To be a real number. Are you okay with this? Okay, we'll do some more example, it'll make sense. Okay, here we go. Before we get going, I want you to write this down. When you are finding square roots of variable expressions, you must be careful to use an absolute value sign when needed to ensure that your answer is positive. Okay, so that's why we need the absolute value sign. Okay, so go ahead and write this down, and we'll do some examples. So let's look at this now. I got square root of 162x squared. Okay, remembering one of those rules that we learned before, like square root of a times square root of b is square root of ab. Could we rewrite it this way?
Yeah.
Square root of 162 times square root of x squared. Right? Your a in this case is 162. Your b is x squared, right? Now go ahead and everybody simplify. See what you get. For 162, what do we need to do, guys, to simplify this? We need to do a factor tree. Good. Go ahead, everybody try. I'll wait. All right. So for 162, how many people got 2 times 3 times 3 times 3 times 3? Good. How would you write this, by the way? Don't we want to pair them up? So yeah, Eric, how should I write this?
3, 2 squares.
Right. So I write square root of 3 squared, square root of 3 squared, and then square root of 2, right? And what's the absolute value? What's square root of x squared? We just said that is going to be, right? So you write square root of 3 squared, square root of 3 squared, square root of 2, square root of x squared. What is square root of x squared, by the way? We just said it's going to be x or absolute value of x? Absolute value of x. What about square root of 3 squared? What is that?
3.
3. So you just get 3 times rad 2 times absolute value of x, and you just simply get 9 rad 2 absolute value of x. Isn't it better to write 9 absolute value of x rad 2? Remember we write down the irrational number, square root, at the very end. Okay, so how many people got this? Raise your hand. Is this pretty straightforward? You guys remember doing things like this? Okay, now you just have some variables. Okay, you just have to put down the absolute value to ensure that your answer is positive, right? Because look, you're simplifying a positive expression with variable in it, right? Now it becomes positive. If you don't have the absolute value, right, the answer, the simplified expression may be negative, which doesn't make any sense, right? When you simplify a square root number that is positive, it's going to be positive at the end, right? Does that make sense? Okay, let's look at example 2 then. Okay, everybody try example 2. I got square root of 400 z to the 6th power. Okay, everybody go ahead and try. Pretty straightforward. Shouldn't take too long. Go ahead. All right, so how many people got square root of 400 times square root of z to the 3rd to the 2nd? Good. Okay, so what does it become? How about Chuck? What'd you get?
I got 5 squared. The square root of 5 squared, square root of 2 squared, square root of 2 squared, square root of z squared, square root of z squared, square root of z squared.
Okay, yeah, you could do it that way, but don't we want to pair them up so that they cancel out? Oh, you did pair them up? Because if you did, wouldn't you get something like this? You get square root of z cubed, right?
Oh yeah.
Right? Okay, how many people put down the absolute value on this too? Good. At the end, when the power is odd, you want to make sure that it becomes right. You put the absolute value there, right? How can we put the absolute value to x to the first power? Is that odd? Yeah. So I mean, I'm sorry, I said it wrong. When we had x just by x itself, right? Isn't that odd number really? This is x to the first power, isn't that right? That's why we need the absolute value. Does that make sense? Even though you don't see 1, okay, this odd number. That's why here, also you need to. Yeah. So the answer. Oh, you got this? Oh, sorry. So when you pair them up, okay, shouldn't you get this? 20 squared, and then z to the third squared. Don't they cancel out like this? Yeah. Okay. Any question? Do you guys get the idea? Okay. All right. Some of you think that we need the absolute value around 20. Is that true? Why not? How come we don't need to put the absolute value around 20? Yeah, 20 is the number, and 20 is that positive or negative? Yeah. So 20 is positive. You don't need to put an absolute value there. All right. All right. Here we go. Let's look at example 3. All right. Example 3. Who's got this one? Okay. Actually, try this first. Sorry. Square root of 36 x to the 8th. Everybody go ahead and try. This one is kind of interesting. I think you may find it interesting. Go ahead, everybody try. I'll wait. Everybody try. So we know that 36 is a perfect square, right? So what is the perfect square of? 6. So how many people wrote down? Okay, so 30 square root of 36, square root of 4. I mean square root of x to the 4th to the 2nd. So how many people wrote this? 6 absolute value of x to the 4th. Raise your hand. Very good, very good. You are 90% right. It turns out, listen, it turns out you can simplify further. This is sort of redundant because you could actually say in this case, you could say this. Why is it that I could get rid of the absolute value in this case? Okay, I want you to think as a team. Go ahead, everybody. Didn't I say that you need the absolute value? How come we don't need it this time? Who can explain why we don't need the absolute value? Okay. Christina.
Because the exponent is even.
Yeah, the exponent is even. What happens when you multiply a number even number of times? No matter whether it's positive or negative. Yeah, it's always positive. Does that make sense? Right? So that's why in this case you don't need the absolute value. It'll be redundant. Does that make sense? So there, okay, so in this, you see, but for x to the third or x to the first, you do need it, right? But when it's x to the even power, you don't need it. Okay. Does that make sense? Good. Okay, example 4, take a look at this. I have square root of 18x to the third power. Okay, let's see if you can do this one. How do you simplify this, guys? Go ahead, everybody try. Everybody simplify this. Of course, you may help each other out as a group. You could do this as a group. That's fine. Go ahead. I'll wait. All right, Aiden, what should I do here?
Make it to the square root of 18 times square root of x to the third.
Yeah, that's what I did first. Very good. Okay, so actually I separated this way. That's fine too, right? Yeah, because I know that square root of x squared. What does that become? How about Paige? Absolute value of x. Okay, so this, we just said square root of x squared, right? Isn't that absolute value of x? What about square root of 18? Square root of 18 is what? 2 times 9, right? Square root of 2 times square root of 9. What is square root of 9? 3. So what does that become? Angel, what's square root of 18 become? 3 rad 2. Okay, how many people wrote this? Raise your hand. Whoops.
Me.
Okay. So how many people wrote 3 rad 2, absolute value of x, square root of x? Okay, square root of x. Now, not all of you, that's good. Because could we simplify a little bit further? How would you write this, Michael?
I put 3 absolute value of x
3 absolute value of x and
rad 2x.
yeah, rad 2x. You could kind of write it this way, right? You could kind of okay, how many people wrote it this way? Simplify a little bit. Very good. Not all of you. It turns out, oh, okay, a lot of you. Turns out there's one other thing you could do in this case. Anybody see it?
Oh my god.
Okay. Okay, I want you to discuss with the team. There's one more thing we could do here. What can we do? So how many people actually did this? So wait a minute. We should put the square root at the end, very end, right? So how many put this? Okay, good. Actually, there's one other thing you could do.
3x.
It turns out, anybody see what you could do?
Take away the.
Okay, Samuel. I could take away the absolute values, right? Why? Why? I want you to discuss it as a team. Go ahead, discuss it as a team. Why? Why is it? All right, Matthew, what did you team come up with? How come we don't need the absolute value in this case?
Let's
Oh, okay.
Explain.
Bella, what did you guys come up with? Square root. Yes, x is inside the square root. And therefore we know x can't be negative. Because if x was negative, Camilla, what would that mean? Yeah, inside the square root is negative, which is not a real number. Does that make sense? So we know by looking, if you have this, right, you know that x has to be positive, right? Because, does that make sense? If x is inside the square root, x can't be negative anyway. Why would you even need to put the absolute value? Because we know x has to be positive anyway. Does that make sense? Do you guys remember? Remember when we did square root of x cubed? We said it's x square root of x. We don't need the absolute value there. Same idea here. Does this make sense? Do you guys get that? Here. Very good. Now let's move on to the next one. They get a little bit creative, and they give you something like this. Your good old trinomial. Square root of x squared minus 6x plus 9. You may say, wait, how do we even simplify this? Well, look at that trinomial. Does that trinomial look kind of familiar? Whenever you see a trinomial, what should you try to do? See if it factors. Does it factor? Yeah, go ahead and factor. And tell me what the solution is. I'll wait. Everybody think about it. Okay, how many people saw that this factors out to x minus 3 times x minus 3? Raise your hand. Did you all see this? Okay, this is easy, right? Because it's x squared. You know, it's going to be got to be x and x, and then minus 3 minus 3. If you don't believe me, right, you can multiply it out, right? You get this trinomial. By the way, this trinomial had a name. What was the name of this trinomial? Now that we know it factors this way. Perfect square trinomial. So how many people wrote down, oh, square root and the square, they cancel out, right? So how many people wrote this? Raise your hand. X minus 3.
X minus 3.
So how many, that's it? What did you guys write then? Yeah, very good. So you guys remember, you got to put the absolute value. Because if you just leave it this way, what if x was like 1? It becomes negative, right? If x was like 5, yeah, or 3, it's not negative. But we got to make sure this thing comes out to be positive, right? This expression, you're squaring some expression. It has to be positive. Therefore, in this case, you still need the absolute value here, right? The answer is absolute value of x minus 3. This has to come out to positive. Does that make sense, guys? Do you see why I put the absolute value here? Because if you didn't, right, the answer could come out to be negative, right? When you simplify a square root of some expression, it must come out to positive, because you had a positive expression, it has to be a positive expression. Now, so far, we've been simplifying expressions, right? Guess what we're going to do now? We don't know. Yeah, we're going to solve. So if I give you this, it says solve 9x squared equals to 64. So you guys know how to solve these sort of expressions?
Yes.
Okay. So what do? First, divide both sides by 9. And we get x squared is equal to 64 over 9. Do you guys remember how to solve this? Whenever you solve now, you have to remember to put the plus or minus. This is when you put the plus or minus. Do you put the plus or minus when you're simplifying expressions? No. Only when you're solving, right? If you have x squared equals some number, you square root both sides. So what's the answer, class? X is equal to?
Plus or minus 8 over 3.
Yeah. Okay, which is negative 8 or negative 3. You guys remember this?
Yes.
So this is when we put plus or minus. Do not put plus or minus when you're simplifying expressions, right? You're starting with a positive expression, it's going to be positive at the end. Okay. If you start with negative expression, it'll be negative at the end. Okay. All right, let me give you a tricky one here. They give you some decimals. This is how they try to trick you a little bit. You will see this on your homework tonight. 0 is equal to 4x squared minus 0.48. Okay. Now, what are you going to do first, guys? Multiply both sides by 100. Yeah, that may be nice. Okay. Oops, I didn't do that, but you should do that. Okay, I'll wait. Go ahead and finish it up. See what you get. So when you multiply both sides by 100, don't you simply get 0 equals to 400 x squared minus 48? Isn't that a little bit easier to deal with? You don't have any decimals, right?
No.
So what do we do next here? Yes, Jonathan? Oh yeah, you could do that. Yeah, so you could actually factor this with the decimal, but I just actually multiply both sides by 100. And then since I don't have any middle term, x to first power, I just added 48 to both sides. And then just got the x squared by itself. Isn't that a little bit easier? Then I could square root both sides. Remember when we were learning solving, right? Quadratic equation, if you don't have the middle term, right? It's easy to solve, right? By just getting the x by itself and square rooting both sides. But you could factor it. There's another way. Or you could use a quadratic formula if you wanted to, but I don't think you want to do that. Okay, so then you square root both sides. Okay, finish it up. Okay, don't forget to put the plus or minus, right? Don't you just get this? By the way, can I leave it as square root of the answer is negative square root of 3 over 5 or right 3 over 5. Any questions? Can you do something like this for your homework tonight? Alright, good.